many times when African countries are in the news, it's always for the bad things happening in those countries. I mean, the great developments and achievements are never spoken about, which has always left me wondering why. In East Africa, Kenya, a country with a population of around 53 million people, as of the time of recording this video in 2023, is doing wonders. The country is bordered by Uganda in the west, Somalia in the northeast, Ethiopia in the north, South Sudan in the northwest, Tanzania in the south, and the Indian Ocean in the east. The Kenyan capital is Nairobi, and I must say it's one of the fastest growing capitals in the world. There's a lot that has changed in Kenya over the last decade or so, and we felt we should be able to highlight some of these achievements and upcoming projects in Kenya. Now, taking you back to 2007, Kenya had a very heated election that resulted into many Kenyans losing their lives due to the post-election violence. It is after this that Kenyans sat and had a dialogue to agree never for something like this to ever happen again in their country. And since then, there's been some level of transparency when it comes to elections, and I must say Kenyan leaders are democratically elected into office. Now, what this means is that the country has been politically stable for more than 10 years, and obviously this has attracted both local and foreign investors to invest their money into the country. And if we are to talk numbers, by 2010, Kenya had a gross domestic product of $45 billion, but as we speak today in 2023, the Kenyan GDP is estimated to be around $115 billion. So obviously you can see that this basically gives you an addition of $65 billion that has been realized in just a period of 12 years. So definitely Kenya is one of those countries that are realizing an uptrend when it comes to economic development. You should not also forget that Kenya is the largest exporter of both tea and flowers on the African continent, and it also exports other cash crops like coffee and vegetables. This earns Kenya a lot of foreign exchange for the goods that are sold out of the country, hence development of the Kenyan economy. When the government noticed a scarcity of jobs and employment opportunities among many Kenyan youths, the government decided to put up different policies and incentives to basically enable the young people to earn online. This has led to many online businesses coming up in Kenya because of the low cost of internet in the country. And I don't know if you've noticed, but Kenya has one of the highest number of online freelancers in the world, and also the Kenyan government was able to open up payment gateways like PayPal, and like some of the other African countries that are still locking some of these services up for their citizens in fear of things like online fraud. Today, if you talk about African countries with the best infrastructure, Kenya is definitely among the best, and over the years, we've seen a growing good road network across the entire country and a massive construction of high-rise buildings in all major cities in the country like Nairobi, Mombasa, Nakuru, and many more other cities in Kenya. Now, of course, all this success is attributed to the citizens themselves, because trust me, Kenyans are one of those people that show great brotherhood and sisterhood to each other, which has eventually gotten them to where they are today. Now, even though Kenya is a multilingual and multicultural African country, the country is brought together by the common language spoken all across the country, and that's the Swahili language. This language is the main mode of communication in Kenya, and even when you go to the remotest part of the country, you'll still find a Swahili speaker in that area, making it very possible for people to communicate amongst each other and leaving no one behind in terms of education, sensitization, and maybe also dialogue. Now, if you would like to learn Swahili, one of the most spoken languages on the African continent, we have an entire course that will guide you through as a beginner to start speaking like a native speaker. To get this course, check out the link in the description. With all this said about Kenya, I believe that nothing and absolutely nothing can stop Kenya on its quest to becoming the very best in the world. For more about the African continent, check out the video on your screen.